Hey everyone, this is Tony Codispoti from thegreatvocalmajority.com, and today we're going to talk about the Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment Situation Report for the month of May. It was released today on June 5th, 2015, and we're going to talk about what the results of that report were. First, however, I'd like to bring you to this Excel file that I use. I call the cheat sheet that summarizes the Bureau of Labor Statistics report on a one-page sheet, and you can get this delivered in your email box on the days that the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases their employment situation summary by leaving your email address at greatvocalmajority.com, and you'll see there's a link at the bottom of this video that allows you to do that. So let's just go over it for the month of May. Bring your attention over here to the left side of this. This is the number of jobs created in the month, 280,000, considered by most people to be a good month. And here are the prior month adjustments, which were good. They were upward, 32,000 in total. Now, some conservative commentators are making hay out of the fact that the unemployment rate went up, and they're kind of making fun of the mainstream media is highlighting it as a positive, and but it is a positive, and I'll show you why in a second. In any event, going down here, you can see which industries benefited the most from this 280,000 jobs. You can see the leading industry was education and health services, and that's just a continuation of an ongoing pattern. Professional and business services kicked up 63,000 jobs, and then leisure and hospitality. As you're going into the summer months, that's to be expected. So those are the three main hitters. Of course, retail trade is always a good sign too. So we have unemployment now back to the March level of 5.5%. It's only an increase of 1/10 of a point. Here's a couple of interesting things though. The black unemployment rate jumped by over half a point to 10.2. Hispanic unemployment edged down by 2/10 of a point. Those are the main drivers. And as we continue down this cheat sheet chart, some of this data comes from the household survey, and some comes from the establishment survey, and you can tell which by this little designation here. Here this says HS, that's household survey. Down here this is ES, that's the establishment survey. You can see employment, total employment went up 272,000. That differs from the amount of jobs created, obviously, because they're done in their different methodologies to doing each of these things. Total involuntary part-time work, however, went up 73,000, whereas all other part-time work went down. And total employment grew by 125,000, and total unemployed more than 27 weeks came down a little bit by 23,000, although it's still pretty high at 2.5 million, and that's almost 29% of everyone who's unemployed. Total workforce increased by 397,000, and that there is combined with this number. See how the total people not in the workforce went down? That means that people are coming from not being in the workforce at all to beginning to look for work or actually finding work. Workforce participation rate went up by 1/10 of a point. That's good news, but that's generally because a lot of people who were previously not even looking for work and unemployed are now looking for work or employed. And average hourly earnings went up by 8 cents, which brings us to about a 2.3% increase year on year. And these are the other various ways that unemployment is measured. U1, U2, U3 is the official rate, U4, U5, and U6. I'm not going to get into those in this particular presentation. Now, some of this you've already seen. This is just a highlights chart at the U3 unemployment rate showing a 5.5% rate. That's gone up in the month by 1/10 of a point. The U6 unemployment rate, which is basically everybody who's looking for work and not looking for work, but is discouraged from looking for work, that's 10.8%. That has not changed. So for all the ballyhooed interest in the number of jobs created, the total number of unemployed, which is really this U6 or a number close to it, is still 10.8%, still in double digits. It's been like that for years now. And as I showed you before, the total unemployed less than 20 or greater than 27 weeks, still 2.5 million people. That went down by 23,000, but we have a long way to go there because that 28.8% is historically pretty high. The workforce participation rate better, jobs created in the month, 280,000, 59,000 better than last month, which is good news. You don't want to discount the good news. A lot of people in the media, as I said earlier, are trying to discount the good news. That's really not smart to do. I mean, if there's good news, say there's good news. And average hourly wages, as I mentioned before, have gone up, which is a good sign, except what's not so good is this here. This 34.5 hours is the average hourly work week. There's no increase in that, which means that the demand for labor is not there. That's not as positive as it could be. We would like to see this number increasing, not remaining flat. This is the annual unemployment rate compared to where we are now. And what you see here on this chart is the blue line going across this line here. That's where we are right now with the unemployment rate, 5.5%. And this red line shows how that number has varied on an annual basis over time. So we're below where we have been, meaning we're improving, and that's what you see, why you see a downward slope in this line here. But we're still way above where we were under the Clinton for the most part, and even under Bush. So we still have a ways to go. The economy has gotten better. The job market has gotten better, but it's not really good. This is what I think the main thrust of this presentation is. And what you have here is same kind of thing, a time series chart, but this one is U6, focused on U6. Again, we are above the historical averages over the last two presidencies, but because the blue line where we are now is below where we were, you could see how that's what's pulling this line down. And hopefully it will continue that way so that we end up underneath down here. Now this chart answers the question, who leaves the workforce? Now, when people leave the workforce entirely, in other words, they stop looking for work, they're either discouraged or they're retired or maybe they're disabled. This red jaggedy line up here goes from 1995 to May of 2015, and it represents people who are retired. It also includes people who have gone on disability. But what you see generally is activity within a given range. It was going up for a while, it went flat for some period, it even came down. But here I created a channel and you can see we have been edging up. And that is the retirement of the baby boomers. That's what you see here. Here, the baby boomers were still working. And you could see that generationally, people entering the workforce, people leaving the workforce, and now you see people retiring in larger numbers. This is expected to continue to rise, just like you see here, gradually. Underneath that, we have what I call discouraged workers. And here, discouraged workers really operated within a very narrow range until 2008, when it started to boom. And this is the boom that came from the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009. As you can see, I noted here when Obama was inaugurated, just to show you that we had been going up for several months prior to that, and then we peaked, and now we're coming down, but we're nowhere near the average of where we were, which is really about down here. So we have to get this number down to around 1,500,000 a month for us to be in a really good shape. This is the ratio of part-time employment to full-time employment. A lot of people have been making the claim, and I've said this in previous months' reports on the BLS highlight report, that a lot of people are making the claim that Obamacare is driving up part-time employment. And what I think the reality is, and that now that we've had some time to look at this data, is that sure, the recession drove up part-time employment in 2008, as it did back in the Reagan era when he had a serious recession, actually a double-dip recession. The difference is, in the Obama recovery, this line, in other words, the number of people coming back as full-time out of part-time, this line is decidedly elongated and protracted. The scope is very, takes a long time. And you can see that under Obama, once the ratio of part-timers to full-timers peaked, it began to come down. And it has come down rather steadily. I mean, it's a jagged line, but it's a generally directionally down, and it's gone down rather steadily over time. The trouble is, it's very protracted. There's a lot of time in here. This is Obamacare passed in 2010 in March. This is 2015 May. So we're talking five years for this. But look at under Reagan. It was just as high. The ratio of part-time to full-time employment was just as high. But look how precipitously it came down. It came down in less than half the time. This lends credibility to the argument that says that people are working part-time because of Obamacare. It lends credibility to the argument. I mean, we don't know for sure what the exact causal factors are, but you can eliminate Obamacare as a causal factor. And here what you have is the average of the long-term unemployed. Long-term unemployed is defined as people who are unemployed more than 27 weeks. In other words, more than 6 months. So under Reagan, you can see that the average was 16.2, and this is how it varied while he was president. Bush, the average was 13.4. That's Bush 41. Under Clinton, it was 16.0, pretty close to where Reagan was. Under George W. Bush, it was 18.7. A little higher than Reagan and Clinton, but not really out of the range of where they had been. Because if you look at the peak here and you look at the peak under Clinton, it's pretty close to the same. And Reagan had a big recession in there, so he exceeded it. So you can understand why Bush is where he was. But now look at Obama. Obama just it shot up, and it stayed up, and it's still, here's where it is now. It's still head and shoulders above where it was. So that's what I meant earlier when I said that still the unemployed are still, as a long-term unemployed, are still a very high percentage of the total unemployed. And that's a problem under Obama. Look at the average. It's 37.9% of the unemployed are unemployed long-term. That's a huge number. Huge. Here's the youth unemployment, and nothing really exciting here on this chart or unexpected. You can see the color codings of the lines. The black line is black youth unemployment. Right now it's at 28.5%, which is better than it has been. at any time during the Obama administration, and even under Bush. It's as low as it's ever been, but it's still way higher than the Latino unemployment rate, which is 8 points lower, and it's almost double the white unemployment rate for youth. So this is a problem. The one good news in this is that there's a downward trajectory on all of them, and the black unemployment rate does appear to be on a steeper trajectory downward, which is good. That's something that we want to see. We want to see these unemployment rates become three lines that are kind of tangled together, as opposed to being so obviously wide apart. But these things are a function of education and training. This is the annual growth rate in average weekly earnings, and you can see that it's really all over the place since 2007. I mean, you got your low point of the recession here, then it peaked in October 2010 and started to drift downward again. This is a sign of a sluggish economy, where there's little demand. There's little demand for products, there's little demand for goods, there's little demand for work. So when that happens, wages are not going to go up. Now you could see here, this little dip here was due to the December 2013 federal shutdown, and then we started to go up again. This rate here is only about 2.3% annual growth, barely ahead of inflation. So to summarize this month's BLS report, what does it tell us? It tells us that the economy is beginning, the job market that is beginning to appear as though it is recovering. Part of the thing you look for in a recovery are people who are able to work, who are no longer in the workforce, re-entering the workforce. This month we saw that happen. We saw people coming out of being not in the labor force to being in the labor force. If you remember, I showed you a chart earlier in this presentation, and this is the chart. And the number that I wanted to point out to you is this 208,000. That's 208,000 people coming from not in the workforce to being in the workforce. See, in April, we had 93,194,000 people not in the labor force. Now, this number, I want to also point out that this number is very often misrepresented in the media. It drives me crazy. A lot of people in that 93 million are retired people. It's not entirely made up of able-bodied people who are just discouraged from working. Approximately 7 million people in that number are people who have been discouraged from working and are looking for a job, or who have stopped looking for a job, but would work if one was available. Now, when 200,000 people of that number come back into the workforce, that means that there's work available, or at least they believe work is available, and they are looking for it. And this, to me, is the most positive thing about the whole jobs report, is this 208,000 people coming back in to the labor force. Now, we'll have to see next month if this continues. If it does, we should see another tick up in the workforce participation rate, which has been going down for many years, and under Obama it's gone down well out of the range of where it had been for many years. Before I go with the end of this video, what I wanted to explain to you is the change in the labor force and how we can demonstrate that. The BLS contains a set of data called workforce status flows. And what I have in front of you here right now is a chart that shows you from the beginning of the month to the end of the month the change in the category of called not in the labor force. And not in the labor force at the beginning of the month was 93,194,000. Now during the month, that number changes, and it changes a number of different ways. You could either add to the number, or people could come out of that number. Now the way people get added into the number is that somebody who is working and during the month they retire, they would no longer be in the labor force because they retired. They ended the month retired. And the same thing with people who have become disabled and are unable to work during the month. They're no longer considered part of the labor force. They too come out. And during the month of May, 4,394,000 people fell into that category. So that was additive to the 93,194,000. Similarly, there were people who were unemployed. They were looking for work. They were probably looking for a long time, most of them. They couldn't find anything. They became discouraged. They just gave up. They stopped looking. And those people are considered out of the labor force once they stop looking for work, and that was 2,008,000 people. Then there's some miscellaneous ads that the BLS doesn't really go into any detail on, and so I won't cover those. But in all, in the month, 6,695,000 people left the labor force. So that means that this number, if we just counted the beginning balance and the number of people that were added to it, was almost 100 million people were not in the labor force. But keep in mind, most of those people are retired. But there's also people who left the not in the labor force category to re-enter the workforce in some capacity. Some people became employed immediately. They began looking for work in the month, and they found work in the month. And that was 4,388,000 people. Quite a number. There's also people who started to look for work but still haven't found work. And that was 2,319,000 people. And then, of course, you have also your miscellaneous category, leading to the total number of people who re-entered the workforce or exited the not in the labor force category of 6,902,000, netting to a number of 207,000, which is the number of people who left the category not in labor force. We're still very high. We still have 92,986,000 people not working, most of whom are retirees and disabled people. But within this number, there are about 7 or 8 million people who could work if they could find work. The point being, when you see people coming out of this category, not in labor force, to look for work, it is a leading indicator that the job market could be, and I want to emphasize could be because this is only 1 month, could be turning around. And that's why you see a bump up in the unemployment rate. There were 207,000 people re-entering the workforce, and there were 280,000 jobs created in the month. So you would understand why that would increase the unemployment rate, because the number of people re-entering the workforce nearly matched the number of jobs created. And the workforce grew otherwise. There were other people re-entering the workforce that were coming from other places. Either they were becoming old enough. Every month there's about 200,000 people just organically that come into the workforce. So you can understand how the unemployment rate went up, because the workforce is on a continuous path of growth. The workforce never really declines, because the workforce is all you got to remember. It's not just people working, it's people working and unemployed people looking for work. So anyway, what I wanted to do was put this chart in the package here to kind of lay out for you exactly how we get to the number of people that are not in the labor force, and how it's a very dynamic number. And every number that is reported by the BLS is really a net number. And as you could see here, you might listen to the radio and you hear, well, this month 200,000 people left the work or entered the workforce that came out of not being in the labor force. And you may have an opinion about whether that's good or bad. And you'll hear other people say, well, there's 93 million people not working in America, and that's a tragedy. Well, it is and it isn't, because most of those people are retired. They are not able-bodied, working-age people, the vast majority of them. And that's a very important point to give you some background on, and I hope I've clarified it for you if you had any questions. But that's what I have for you today on this BLS report. There's a link at the bottom of this video. You can go to the website. You can get this presentation there. You can also get the copy of the cheat sheet. If you want, you can give me your email address, and I will email you the cheat sheet and a link to this video each month on the date that the BLS announces the situation report. That's it for me, Tony Cottospati. Thanks for listening, and take care.